What's going on, football fam? My name is Dave Sarner, and welcome to another edition of the Rise and Fall Fantasy Football Show, Week 9 edition. Now, in this week's games, we're going to be going over every single game on the Week 9 docket, as always. So just so you know, we cover one episode per game this week, so there's going to be a lot of episodes coming your way. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel, ring that bell so you'll get notified when all of my videos go live, and then you'll have all that content ready for this Sunday. Now, with all that being said, enjoy the episode for Week 9. So on this episode, we're going to be going over the 1 o'clock matchup between the Chicago Bears and the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee Titans are 5.5 home favorite here, while the over-under is at 46.5. I don't know if it's going to quite reach there. I think Tennessee has a pretty good offense. Obviously, Tannehill's playing great. A.J. Brown is great. Derrick Henry is great. Corey Davis had a really good game last week, but it is the Chicago Bears defense here. So going back into the matchups last week, though, let's see what kind of production we're looking at. Let's see kind of the situation, all right? So the Chicago Bears, let's start with them. Allen Robinson led the way for the Bears, 17.7 fantasy points last week against the New Orleans Saints. Nick Foles had 16.88, probably one of his best outings, if not maybe his best outing all year. Just missed it by the Atlanta game. He had 17 in that game. But in terms of yards, 272, his highest yard total from a passing perspective against New Orleans. They're giving up a lot of points. It's not going to be, well, it could be the same with this Tennessee defense. Tennessee is giving up a ton of points right now to both the quarterback and the wide receiver. So what that tells me is Allen Robinson must start this week. Nick Foles, interesting streamer option, DFS. I'm talking DFS specifically on that. I think he could do some things here. Mooney's starting to get a little more involved. He seems to have some rapport to tight ends. The defense is really good. So I don't know exactly how I feel about Foles. I think, whatever it may be. Streamer option, again, 10th most points given up by Tennessee to quarterbacks. It isn't something you just ignore. They have really been letting up points here. So I love the matchup here for Allen Robinson, though. You start him, don't look back. He's going to have a really good week. Last week, 17 points against New Orleans defense. That was, in my opinion, much better than Tennessee. And 7 targets, 6 catches, 87 yards, and a touch. Expect similar production, a minimum of 8 targets for him this week. We love volume on the show, and you should too. 8 targets minimum for Allen Robinson against the team giving up the second most points to wide receivers. That's a matchup that I'm going to exploit all day long. On the other side of that, there's another receiver that really started to step up here. We've seen little flashes over the year, especially in week 2 against New York Giants. Last week, he comes back, and Darnell Mooney, 15.4 fantasy points, 6 targets, 5 catches for 69 and a touchdown. 2 less targets, by the way, than Allen Robinson. 1 less target, and he only missed 1 of his catches. So he respectably had just as good of a game, if anything, than Allen Robinson. And while, another guy coming in, stealing production from A-Rob, not the best scenario, hold on a second. We want someone to be able to take some pressure away from Allen Robinson. We want Nick Foles to be able to spread the ball a little bit because we know no matter what, it's going to come back to Allen Robinson. So if Darnell Mooney can start to step up, that can really mean big things for Allen Robinson. Honestly, I think I'm convincing myself to put him higher right now. I have A-Rob at number 8. All right, he's only below Hopkins, Adams, the 3 we talked about in the last episode, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett at 3 and 4, Diggs at 5. You have Julio at 6, Keenan Allen at 7, and then you have Allen Robinson. And I would be, I may move him up to 6. He might jump Julio Jones and Keenan Allen for me. And I just think that he is the guy. He's the one that they're going to target, and he gets production all day long. With a great matchup, I cannot see him not getting double-digit points for you this week. And I do love Darnell Mooney. I do have him a little higher than I usually. I mean, granted, I have him at number 50, but he could be a guy that might rise up the rankings by the end of it. It's a great matchup. On the other side of things, tight end. Titans are actually decent against tight end. It's the strongest position, 17th most points given up to them. I am more concerned with the fact that Cole Kmet keeps vulturing production from Jimmy Graham. I don't like a team that is already lacking offensive weapons to be splitting the production at tight end. It's the least productive position in the NFL today, right now. Jimmy Graham, Cole Kmet, I don't know who's going to be the guy. It seems like when I want to start Jimmy, great matchup. Cole Kmet seems to take the production that we need. I don't trust the situation this week. I have those two guys much lower on my list than I usually do. Jimmy, I have at 19. Cole Kmet isn't even on there right now with the way, fumble. We don't know what the heck's going to happen with that. So I'm not going anywhere near that. David Montgomery, though, 11th against running backs, the Titans are. I do have David Montgomery decently high. He's at 17, right above Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, kind of the combo, above Le'Veon Bell as well. But he is below Gaskins, Myles Gaskin. I would take JaMychal Hasty over him. Damian Harris, I would start over David Montgomery, as well as Justin Jackson and Melvin Gordon. So, I don't know. Do what you will if you have David Montgomery, unless you have, one of the top 10 guys, one of these guys that are just like your stud running backs. I don't know if it's a great matchup. 11th most points given up, so it's not a terrible matchup, but I just don't love David Montgomery. So until I see more production from a passing perspective, which is probably not going to happen, I'm going to keep David Montgomery around the 17 range. There's no reason he should ever be near the top 12 with his low ceiling. Now, on the other side of that, Tennessee Titans, guys, we have Ryan Tannehill doing his thing, guys. He is not doing too bad this year. He has not had less than 17 fantasy points in any week this year, except for week 3 against Minnesota, which was kind of an anomaly. He did have 300 yards in that game, ironically. So it was the second most passing yards, but he didn't get the touchdowns there. That was also when A.J. Brown was out. Since A.J. Brown has been back, he's been better than ever. He had the 30-point game against Buffalo. He had the 28-point game against Houston. Those are two good matchups here. But then he had two tougher matchups. Pittsburgh, 17.3. He had 220 and 2 touchdowns. Doesn't need to do crazy amount, but just enough, right? Cincinnati, 17 points last week. A little here or there. Tougher matchup. However, this week is a week that I would sit Ryan Tannehill. And let me tell you why. The Bears are giving up the 31st most points, meaning they're giving up the second least amount of points in the league to the quarterback position and the wide receiver position. They're giving up the 30th most points. So that's not a good combination in any means for the quarterbacks or the receivers for Tennessee going against Chicago. Kyle Fuller, Eddie Jackson, they are legit. I love Eddie Jackson. I just want to take a quick second and tell you guys from a fan who is a fan of the Washington football team, who had Sean Taylor, who has not filled that role since. I am so jealous of you Bear fans for having Eddie Jackson. He is phenomenal. In my opinion, one of the best safeties in the league. Easily. And I don't even think it's a discussion right now. So with that in mind, guys, Corey Davis, I know he's going to be a hot name and people picked him up and they feel like fucking champions with him this week. They ain't going to feel that way with him this week. Week 9. Don't start Corey Davis. A.J. Brown, you'll still start even in a tough matchup, but I'm telling you, he's going to get shadowed by Kyle Fuller. The only reason why I would say, okay, Corey Davis has a chance is because of that shadowing matchup. I have to have a feeling that they're going to try to put Fuller on A.J. Brown and shut down that component. Without him, I really do think the offense is not, I don't want to say it doesn't function, but it's not productive the way that you need it from a fantasy perspective outside of maybe Derrick Henry. Now, on the other side of this, let's look at the running back, Derrick Henry. Last week, he put up 17 points, continues to produce, doesn't need to do it with the receiving end, by the way. 18 rushes, 112 yards, and a touchdown last week. Derrick Henry has been fantastic this year. Has not had less than double-digit touchdown or points in a half-point PPR since week 2 against Jacksonville, where he had 8.4. Essentially, his floor is 9 points minimum in any format, which is the best part, especially non-PPR. He's probably a champion right now for you. So, Derrick Henry, even though it's a decently tough matchup, it is the Bears. I know they're going to try to grind out yards, especially because I do predict that Ryan Tannehill in the pass game is going to struggle a little bit. Derrick Henry is going to need to do some things. He's going to have some grinded out yards, some tougher yards this week, but I think it's doable. I think he can make some things happen this week. Listen, he went against Cincinnati last week, who's giving up the 17th fewest points to to running backs. So that's only 3 spots lower or 3 spots higher than the Chicago Bears. So I do think Derrick Henry can still produce. He showed he can do it last week against a decently better defense than, say, the one that he's going to go up against. Now, granted, remember, I'm not sure if it was before or after, but I believe Carlos Dunlap was traded before that game. So even though the stats before were pretty stingy, last week could have been a product of losing one of their players. And, when that happens, the stats are a little skewed. So fire up Derrick Henry. Don't be afraid of that. You're not going to sit him, but don't be worried about sitting him. He'll do fine. He'll have a nice floor. He'll get you minimum 10 points, 11 points, even in a non-PPR league. You'll feel fine about that. I would start Derrick Henry and try to maybe avoid everyone else. A.J. Brown, you'll take your shot on, but it's a tough matchup. And don't be surprised if he gets shadow coverage. Don't be surprised if he doesn't produce this week. And then maybe one flaw, I would say maybe a flaw because they're ranked number 12th at this position, but the Bears and the tight ends giving up the 12th most points to tight ends. Jonnu Smith, I don't know what to do with this guy. I mean, we got Fursker getting more points than him last week. We Nichols getting more points than him. I mean, it's getting frustrating with Jonnu Smith the last couple of weeks, especially the last 3 weeks, because you saw him put up 18 points, getting 2 touchdowns, being involved in Buffalo before the bye week, with the whole COVID thing. Week 3, 2-1, 8 points in week 3, 22 in week 2, 11 in week 6, or week 1 rather. Week 6, 1.8. Week 7, 1.4. Week 8, 3.9. A total of 8 targets for 4 catches and like 40 yards, not even, maybe, or a little bit over 40 yards. That's a yikes, guys, and I don't know why that is, because theoretically he had great matchups, so that scares me. So I am going to look somewhere else if I can this week. It's a decent matchup, and I still have him at number 8 because of how scarce the position is. So you're going to start him if you have him, unless you have another guy like, say, Robert Tonyan, TJ Hawkinson, start them over him. Noah Fant start over Jonnu Smith. Andrews and the other guys, obviously. Gronk start over him. But then it gets to like Hunter Henry, Jared Cook, Gesicki, and even Evan Ingram, who is looking better. Ingram's a guy who I might jump up the board and maybe start over Jonnu Smith. But I think rationally, you're not going to do that. You're going to rely on the guy who's been a little more consistent, who's had a couple of bad weeks, rather than the guy who's been consistently bad and had like a decent couple of weeks. But it's a flag. It's a flag. I mean, you're talking about like 6 points in 3 week span when the guy was averaging double digit, 15 plus fantasy points. Doesn't make any sense. I hope they get a little bounce back this week. It would be the area where I think Tannehill could have some success in the pass game. They're giving up the 12th most points, like we said. So I think you could take a flyer on Jonnu Smith if you needed to. If you have a better option, go for it, So with that being said, guys, let's go recap here. We don't like Ryan Tannehill. We don't like the receivers this week. A.J. Brown, Corey Davis could be a really messy game against Kyle Fuller and Eddie Jackson in that secondary and that defense. I do like Derrick Henry. You're going to start him. I think he'll have a good day. He's just Mr. Consistent, and his floor is just super high right now. About 9-10 fantasy points pretty much. And then a tight end, Jonnu Smith, you could take a flyer on. It's up to you. I'm not personally high on him. I have him at 8, and I don't feel good about that. On the other side of things, Nick Foles, great matchup here. This could be one of those nice DFS streamer weeks for him, along with A-Rob. Top 5 receiver, in my opinion. I think I have him at number 8 right now. That might absolutely change by the end of the week. Go ahead and start Allen Robinson. Go ahead and start Darnell Mooney. Again, Titans giving up the second most points to wide receivers. Take advantage while you can. And of course, David Montgomery going up against 11th giving up the team that's giving up the 11th most points to running backs. David Montgomery, I have at number 18. You can feel comfortable starting him. I think he'll be all right, but he won't maybe explode on the scene or do anything that you would think. The 25 points that you want. I just don't think he's going to get that for you. And then, of course, Jimmy Graham, Cole Kmet, I'm staying away from. I don't know what the deal is with that situation, and I don't like timeshares on a team at a tight end position that is not like elite options, Staying away from that all day. I don't want to touch that aspect. I'd rather go with like a Logan Thomas or Jordan Reed in tougher matchups than going with Cole Kmet or Jimmy Graham. With all that being said, that's all the information we got for the Bears at the Titans. Good luck on your fantasy matchups.
Sitting throwing rocks across the pavement, hoping it will cave and swallow me